Colonel Alexander Voss pressed the muzzle of his rifle against the throat of the young American radio operator he had just dragged from the northern watchtower, and he smiled. "Send one word of warning," he whispered, "and I will make your friends watch you die slowly." Then he keyed the soldier's own radio spoke in a flawless American accent and told Black Ridge Base that everything was quiet. It was not quiet. 200 soldiers were about to be surrounded, and the only person who would see it coming hadn't even unpacked her bag. Before we begin, if stories of courage, sacrifice, and the hidden strength inside ordinary people move, you take a moment to subscribe and follow this story all the way to the end. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from so I can see just how far this story has traveled. Olivia Walker had learned a long time ago that danger never announced itself. It arrived quietly, wearing an ordinary face hiding inside an ordinary morning. So when the transport truck carried her up the last frozen mile toward Black Ridge Forward Base, and the young driver kept glancing at her in the mirror like she was made of glass, she smiled and said nothing and let him believe she was exactly what she appeared to be. "First time up here, ma'am?" the driver asked. He was maybe 20. His hands were steady on the wheel, but his voice had that eager, nervous edge that men his age had before they had ever seen anything real. "First time at this base," Olivia said. "Not my first mountain." "You get used to the cold," he said. "Sort of. Captain Walker, he never complains about it. Toughest officer I ever met, honest." Something warm and quiet moved through her chest at the sound of Ethan's name. "He never complained at home either," she said. "Man could sleep through a hurricane." The driver laughed, relieved to have made her laugh. "He talks about you," he said. "Not a lot, he's private. But when your name comes up, his whole face changes. We all noticed." Olivia looked out at the white ridge line, at the way the snow lay heavy and undisturbed across the slopes, and she felt her heart pull toward the man waiting for her at the end of this road. 3 years of marriage, most of it spent apart. Emails that arrived weeks late, phone calls cut short by static and duty, and the thousand small emergencies that ran a man's life when he wore a uniform. She had come up this mountain for one reason. She wanted 2 days, 2 ordinary days where nobody needed her to be brave and nobody's life depended on how still she could hold her hands. That was all she wanted. The truck rounded the final bend and the base came into view, and the first thing Olivia noticed was the thing that would not let her go for the rest of the day. The antenna on the eastern communications mast was bent, not damaged by weather, bent at an angle that no wind made, and the guard tower beside it was empty. She told herself it was nothing. She was very good at telling herself things. Ethan was waiting at the gate when the truck stopped, and for one perfect second, the mountain and the cold and the bent antenna, they all disappeared, and there was only him. He pulled the door open before she could reach for the handle, and he lifted her down into the snow like she weighed nothing, and he held her so tight she could feel his heartbeat through both their coats. "You came," he said into her hair. "You actually came." "I said I would." "You've said a lot of things over 3 years." She pulled back and looked at him, at the lines the last deployment had carved around his eyes, at the gray that had crept into the stubble along his jaw. "I mean it this time," she said. 2 days, just us." 2 days, he repeated like a man afraid to believe in good news. "I cleared everything I could clear. There's a briefing tonight I can't get out of, but after that, I'm yours." "A briefing," she said, "on a quiet weekend." Something flickered across his face. Fast. Almost nothing. But Olivia had spent years reading the smallest movements in a man's expression, and she caught it before he could bury it. "Routine," he said. "Command's been jumpy lately, and chatter on the networks, probably nothing." "Chatter about what?" Ethan smiled, and it was the smile he used when he wanted to close a door gently. "Olivia, you just got here. Let me carry your bag." She let him take it. She let him lead her through the gate with his arm around her shoulders. She let the soldiers who passed nod politely and call her ma'am and treat her like a guest. But her eyes were already moving, already cataloging, already doing the things she had promised herself she would never do again. The second guard tower was manned by 1 soldier instead of 2. The motor pool had 4 vehicles, and 3 of them had their hoods up. And every man she passed had the loose, easy posture of soldiers who believed deep down that nothing was going to happen to them today. She hated that she noticed. She hated that some cold, precise part of her had woken up the moment she stepped through the gate and started counting exits. That part of her was supposed to be dead, She had killed it herself. "You're doing the thing," Ethan said quietly. "What thing?" "The thing where you go somewhere in your head and your eyes get flat." He said it gently, but there was worry under it. "You used to do it after your last job, before you'd tell me anything." "I'm just tired from the drive." "Olivia?" "I'm fine, Ethan." He stopped walking. They were in the middle of the yard and the wind bit at them, and he took both her hands in his. "You have never once in your life been fine when you said you were fine," he said. "But okay, we'll do it your way. Come meet the people who've been keeping me alive." The mess hall was warm and loud and full of the smell of coffee, and for a while Olivia let herself pretend. Ethan introduced her to his team one by one, and she shook their hands and learned their names and watched them relax around her because a soldier's wife was a safe thing, a reminder of home proof that the world outside the wire still existed. There was Sergeant Ray Delgado, broad and loud, who greeted her with a bear of a handshake and immediately started telling a story about Ethan getting lost on a training exercise. There was Corporal Amy Fields, young and sharp-eyed, the only other woman on the base who studied Olivia with the frank curiosity of someone who didn't meet many people worth being curious about. There was Private Tommy Nash, so young it made Olivia's chest ache, who blushed when he shook her hand and knocked over his own coffee. And there was Lieutenant Grant Mercer, second in command, who smiled at all the right moments and laughed at all the right jokes and whose eyes never quite arrived where his smile did. Olivia noticed him the way she noticed the bent antenna. She didn't know why. She just filed it away. "So how'd a guy like Walker land a woman like you?" Delgado asked, dropping into the seat across from her. "No offense, Cap." "Plenty taken," Ethan said dryly. "I mean, look at him," Delgado said. "Man's got a face like a boot." "He was kind to me," Olivia said, "at a time when I didn't think I deserved kindness." The table went quiet for a beat. It was more than she'd meant to say. Ethan's hand found hers under the table. "That's a heavy sentence for a Saturday," Delgado said, not unkindly. "Everybody's carrying something," Olivia said. "You learn to keep the weight even." Corporal Fields was watching her closely now. "You sound like you've done some carrying." "I raised two younger brothers after our folks passed," Olivia said. It was true. It was also not the whole truth, and she offered it precisely because it would satisfy them and end the conversation. "You learn to keep going." It worked. The table moved on. Delgado launched into another story. Ethan laughed, and the sound of his laughter was so rare and so good that Olivia almost let herself forget the empty tower and the bent mast. Almost. Then Private Nash said something that changed the afternoon. "Weird thing this morning," he said, mopping up his spilled coffee. "Northern Watch didn't check in on the hour. Radio said everything was green, but Reyes always does the little tap thing, 3 taps on the mic before he talks. Been doing it for months. This morning, no taps, just the check-in." "So," Delgado said, "maybe he forgot." "Reyes doesn't forget," Nash said. "It's like his good luck thing." Olivia set down her coffee very carefully. "When was this?" she asked. Everyone looked at her. It was the first question she'd asked that had teeth in it, and she felt them notice the change in her voice, the flattening of it, the way it stopped being a guest's voice and became something else. Nash said. "Around 6. Why, boom." "No reason," Olivia said, and made herself smile, and the smile felt like lifting a weight she had promised she'd never lift again. "Just curious how you all keep track of each other up here." But Ethan had seen her face. Ethan had seen it, and he was frowning now, and under the table his hand had tightened around hers. "Olivia," he said low just for her. "What is it?" "Nothing. Don't do that. Not to me. Not anymore." His voice dropped further. "You made a sound just now, the one you make when something's wrong and you don't want anyone to know yet. I heard that sound for a whole year and I never once knew what it meant. Tell me what it means." She looked at him. Her husband, the man who had married her without ever asking about the parts of her past she flinched away from. The man who had waited patient as stone for 3 years hoping she'd hand him the pieces of herself she kept locked away. And she almost told him. Right there in the mess hall over cold coffee, she almost opened the door. Then Lieutenant Mercer stood up abruptly and said, "Captain briefing got moved up. Colonel wants us in the ops room in 10. "It's scheduled for 1900, Ethan said. "Command bumped it. Weather system moving in. They want us squared away before it hits." Olivia looked out the mess hall window at a sky that was to her trained eye perfectly clear. What weather system? She asked. Mercer's smile arrived a half-second too late. The one on the satellite, ma'am. Big front coming up from the south. You'll see it by nightfall. She held his gaze for 1 second longer than was polite. He didn't look away, but something in his jaw tightened, and Olivia understood with a certainty she couldn't yet explain that Lieutenant Grant Mercer had just told her a lie. She didn't know what it meant, but she knew what a lie tasted like. Go, she told Ethan gently. Do your briefing. I'll be here. He hesitated. He looked at her like a man who could feel the ground shifting under his feet but couldn't see the crack. 20 minutes, he said. Then we're done for the day. I promise. I'll hold you to it. He kissed her forehead and left with the others, and Mercer went last, and at the door the lieutenant paused and looked back at her once. It was a small thing, just a glance. But Olivia had spent years learning to read the difference between a man measuring a room and a man measuring a person, and Mercer was measuring her. She sat alone in the mess hall and let the cold thing inside her fully wake up. She didn't want it. She had built an entire life around not wanting it. But it was awake now, and it was doing what it had always done, which was assemble small pieces into a shape. A missing luck signal from the Northern Watch, an empty guard tower, a bent communications antenna, a weather front that wasn't in the Skontajo, a second-in-command whose eyes lied when his mouth smiled. She stood up. She told herself she was just going to walk. Just stretch her legs. Just look around a base she was curious about, because her husband had spent 2 years of his life here. That was the story she told herself as she walked out into the cold, and her feet carried her, without her deciding it, toward the northern perimeter. Corporal Fields caught up with her halfway across the yard. Ma'am, she said, where are you headed? Just walking. Is that allowed? Most places. Not the north wall. Restricted. Fields fell into step beside her anyway. You got a reason for going that direction? Or is it a coincidence you picked the one part of the base I can't let you into? Olivia stopped and turned to face her. The young corporal was smart, smarter than the rest of them, and she was watching Olivia the way one professional watches another, even if she didn't know yet that was what she was doing. Corporal Fields, Olivia said, how long have you been up here? 14 months. In 14 months, has the Northern Watch ever missed its luck signal before, Fields went very still. How do you know about that? Nash mentioned it. That's an inside thing. That's not something a visitor should be asking about. Her hand drifted not to her weapon, but near it, an unconscious movement. Who are you, ma'am? I'm Ethan's wife. That's not what I asked. The two women looked at each other in the cold, and something passed between them, an understanding that had no words. Fields had spent 14 months noticing things nobody else noticed, and she had just met the first person on this base who noticed more. Answer me one thing, Olivia said quietly, and I'll tell you everything you want to know. Has anyone laid eyes on Reyes since 6 this morning? Not heard him on the radio. Seen him. Fields opened her mouth to say yes. Then she closed it. Then slowly the color went out of her face. No, she whispered. No. We heard the check-in. Green status. But nobody's actually... She stopped. Oh God, nobody's actually seen him. Or the man on the tower beside the mast, Olivia said. Or whoever's supposed to be on the eastern wall, because that antenna's been bent for at least a day, and nobody's fixed it, which means nobody's up there to notice it. Fields was breathing fast now. This is this is a supply base. Nothing happens here. We watch a road and a pass, and we freeze, and we go home. Nobody attacks Black Ridge. There's nothing here to take. There's 100 kinds of nothing worth taking, Olivia said. Weapons, fuel, a radio relay that talks to every unit in these mountains, a place to plant men and wait. She looked at the ridgeline, at the untouched snow, and the cold thing inside her ran the numbers without asking permission. If I wanted to take this base, I'd cut the communications first so the outside world kept hearing that everything was fine. I'd do it quietly, one position at a time from the top down, using the high ground. And I'd do it under cover of a storm nobody could see coming. There's no storm. There will be, Olivia said. Or they'll say there is. It gives them a reason to have everyone inside heads down, not looking at the mountains when they close the ring. Fields stared at her. Ma'am, how do you know this? How does Captain Walker's wife know any of this? And there it was, the question she'd been running from for 3 years. She could lie. She was good at lying. She'd built a whole quiet life out of one enormous, gentle lie. She could tell this frightened young woman that she read a lot of thrillers, that she had an overactive imagination, that she was just a nervous wife jumping at shadows. Instead, for the first time in 3 years, Olivia Walker told the truth. Because I used to do this for a living, she said. The taking, not the defending. I spent 9 years learning exactly how a well-planned force takes a position like this apart. I trained the people who train the people who'd be doing it. And everything I've seen since I got off that truck 2 hours ago has told me the same thing. This base is already being taken, and almost nobody here knows it yet. Fields' radio crackled on her shoulder. A voice came through, calm and routine, requesting a status check on the western supply gate. Fields lifted the radio to answer. Olivia's hand closed over hers. Don't, Olivia said softly. Listen to it. Really listen. Not the words. The voice. Phone. Fields listened. The voice repeated the request, patient, professional, perfectly ordinary. That's Sergeant Kowalski, Fields said. That's just, she stopped. That's not how Kowalski talks. Kowalski says copy. He doesn't say acknowledge. Nobody up here says acknowledge. Somebody does now, Olivia said. Somebody who learned our procedures out of a manual and thinks they've got them right but got one word wrong, which means whoever's on the other end of that radio isn't Sergeant Kowalski, which means the Western Gate is already gone too. For a long, terrible moment, Corporal Amy Fields stood frozen in the snow, and Olivia watched the last of her denial crumble. We have to tell the captain, Fields said. We have to tell somebody. The colonel? Where's the briefing being held? The ops room, center of the base, below ground. Below ground, Olivia repeated, and something cold slid down her spine. Who called them all into a room in the center of the base below ground, with no windows, all at the same time right before the storm? Fields' eyes went wide. Lieutenant Mercer relayed the order. Have you ever known your colonel to move a briefing up 4 hours for weather? No, Fields breathed. No, never. He hates changing schedules. He says predictability is discipline. Then somebody used his name to gather every officer on this base into one room they can't see out of. Olivia was already moving and walking fast now, her guest's face gone completely replaced by something older and harder that she had buried under 3 years of ordinary Sundays. Corporal, I need you to trust me for the next 10 minutes with your life and everyone else's, and I need you to know that I would give anything to be wrong. But I'm not wrong. I'm never wrong about this. That's the tragedy of it. What do we do? You're going to go to the armory, Olivia said. Quietly, you're going to see if the man who's supposed to be guarding it is a man you recognize. If he is, you tell him the truth and you get that armory open. If he's not, she stopped. If he's not, you walk away like you forgot something and you find me and you don't say a single word to him. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am. Amy. Olivia used her first name and the young woman flinched at the sudden intimacy of it. Whatever happens in the next hour, you are going to want to freeze. Everyone does the first time. The freezing is the thing that kills you. You've been noticing things nobody else notices for 14 months. That means you were built for this, even if nobody ever told you. When it starts, you keep moving. Do you understand me? You keep moving. When what starts? Olivia looked up in the ridgeline one last time, and this time she saw it. A flash. Small. Almost nothing. The kind of flash that a scope makes when it catches the light, the kind of flash that only a person who had spent years on the other end of one would ever recognize. There was a sniper on the high ground, watching them, watching her. Get out of the open, Olivia said, and her voice was so calm and so absolute that Fields obeyed before her mind had finished processing the words, stepping sideways behind the concrete corner of the mess hall. Move. Now. Casual. Don't run. Ma'am. There's a shooter on the North Ridge, 900 meters, maybe more. He's been watching us this whole conversation. And the only reason we're still breathing is that killing us now would give the whole thing away before they're ready. Olivia's mind was moving at a speed she hadn't allowed it in 3 years, and God help her, it felt like coming home and it made her sick. Which means we have a few minutes, maybe less, and I have to get to that ops room before they spring it because my husband is in that room and I will burn this entire mountain down before I let anything happen to him. Fields stared at her, this stranger, this wife. This woman who had arrived carrying a scarf and a small bag and had somehow in the space of a single afternoon become the most dangerous person on Black Ridge Base. Who are you? she asked one more time, and this time it wasn't an accusation. It was almost a prayer. I'm someone who walked away from all of this, Olivia said, already moving toward the center of the base, toward the man she loved, toward the past she'd sworn she would never touch again. I gave it up. I chose a different life. I chose him. And I swore on everything I had left that I would never pick up a rifle as long as I lived. She glanced back once at the ridgeline, at the invisible eye watching her from the snow. Looks like the mountain didn't care what I swore. Ethan Walker sat in the ops room and could not shake the feeling that something was wrong with his wife. It wasn't the tiredness. He knew her tiredness. This was the other thing, the thing from the first year of their marriage, the thing he'd never had a name for. The flatness in her eyes, the way she'd counted the exits in the mess hall without knowing he'd watched her do it. The question about Reyes, the word she'd used, chatter like she knew exactly what it meant, like it belonged in her mouth. He'd married a woman with a locked room inside her. He'd always known that. He'd told himself he didn't need to see inside it that he loved her enough to let her keep one door closed. But sitting in this windowless room while Lieutenant Mercer set up the briefing, Ethan felt for the first time that the locked room might be the most important thing about her, and that he'd been a coward for never asking. "Where's the colonel?" Delgado asked from the back. "He called this thing early now. He's late to it." "On his way," Mercer said, getting a final read on the weather. "What weather?" Delgado said. "It's clear as glass out there." Ethan looked at Mercer, and Mercer, for just a fraction of a second, looked back at him with an expression Ethan had never seen on his second-in-command's face before. It wasn't nerves, it wasn't cold, it was something worse. It was the look of a man doing arithmetic, a man counting people in a room, a man waiting for a clock only he could see to reach a certain number. The door burst open. It was Corporal Fields, out of breath, her weapon in her hands, and behind her impossibly was Olivia. "Everybody up," Fields said. "Weapons, now, this is not a drill." For one heartbeat, nobody moved. 12 trained soldiers stared at a corporal and a civilian's wife standing in the doorway, and their brains refused to leave the ordinary world they'd woken up in that morning. Then Mercer's hand went toward his sidearm, and Olivia said one word: "Don't." She wasn't armed. She was standing in a doorway in a winter jacket. But something in the way she said that single word, in the absolute stillness of her body, in the flatness of her eyes, made Lieutenant Grant Mercer's hand freeze halfway to his weapon. "You're going to want to move your hand away from that," Olivia said quietly, "and put it flat on the table where I can see it, because I already know. I've known since the mess hall. You called them all into this room. You gave them a weather front that isn't there, and you got one word wrong on the radio pretending to be Kowalski, but Kowalski's already dead, isn't he? And you know it because you're the one who let them in." The room went utterly silent. Ethan felt the floor drop out of the world. He looked from Mercer to his wife, this woman he'd been married to for 3 years, standing in the doorway speaking in a voice he had never once heard, a voice made of ice and certainty, a voice that belonged to someone he had never met. "Olivia," he said, "what is happening?" "Ethan." She didn't look at Mercer. She looked at her husband, and for one second the ice cracked and something desperate and loving showed through it. "There's a force in the mountains, professionals, a lot of them. They've been taking this base apart quietly since before dawn, and they were going to trigger the rest of it any minute, probably the second the colonel walked through that door, so they could get every officer at once. Your lieutenant here has been helping them." "That's insane," Mercer said, but his hand was still frozen on the table and there was sweat on his upper lip. "Captain, your wife is having some kind of—" "How many?" Ethan asked. He wasn't asking Mercer, he was asking Olivia. And in that moment, in the way her husband turned to her instead of his own officer, in the way he trusted her over every trained instinct that should have told him to do otherwise, Olivia felt something break open in her chest, 3 years of hiding, collapsing all at once. "At least 40, as she said. Coordinated. High ground on the north and east ridges. Snipers at least 2, probably more. They've cut your comms so the outside still thinks you're green. They've got your western gate and your northern watch and your eastern wall. They're going to come down the moment they realize we're moving, and when they do, it's going to happen fast. And this room, this windowless room in the center of the base, is the worst place any of you could possibly be." She looked around at all of them, at Delgado and Nash, and the rest at their pale, frozen faces. "You've got maybe 90 seconds before they realize their trap didn't spring. So I need you to stop looking at me like I'm crazy and start doing exactly what I say, because I am the only person in this room who has ever planned an attack exactly like the one that's about to hit you. And why? Mercer said, his voice tight, playing his last card. Should any of them listen to a housewife? Olivia looked at him then, finally. And Grant Mercer, who had betrayed his own men, who had let killers through the wire, who had smiled through an entire afternoon while planning to hand a dozen soldiers to their deaths, felt the full weight of that flat, ancient gaze land on him, and something in him went cold. Because I'm not a housewife, Olivia said. My name is Olivia Walker. Before that, it was Olivia Reyes. I spent 9 years as a Marine Scout sniper, and for 4 of them, I was the senior instructor at the schoolhouse, where the best shooters in the Corps learn their trade. I have taken apart bases exactly like this one. I know every move the men on that ridge are about to make, because I'm the reason half the men in the world who do this for a living know how to do it at all. She let that land. So when I tell you to move, Lieutenant, you should understand that I am the single worst enemy you could possibly have made today. And the only reason you're not already dead is that I need one more answer out of you first. Ethan stared at his wife. 9 years, senior instructor, scout sniper. The locked room in the center of the woman he loved had just opened, and inside it was not the small, dark secret he'd always imagined. Inside it was a legend. Inside it was the most dangerous person he had ever stood beside, and she'd been sleeping next to him for 3 years, making him coffee, laughing at Delgado's stories, hiding the whole vast truth of herself because she thought it would frighten him away. You never told me, he said. It came out barely a whisper. I know, Olivia said, and for 1 second in the middle of everything, her voice broke. I know. I was going to. I kept meaning to. Every day it got easier to be the woman you thought you married than the woman I actually was. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Ethan. But right now I need you to be the officer I know you are, and I need you to give the order because they'll follow you and they don't know me. Tell them to move. And Captain Ethan Walker, looking at his wife across a room full of frozen men, with the clock running down and killers on the ridge and everything he thought he knew about his own life crumbling around him, did the only thing that mattered. He trusted her. You heard my wife, he said, standing, his voice snapping into the hard, clear tone of a man who had led soldiers his whole career. Weapons up. We are under attack. This is real. Delgado Nash on me. Fields, you're with Olivia. Nobody uses the main corridor. Nobody gathers in the open. He turned to Mercer, and his face was a terrible thing to see. And somebody put this traitor on the ground. Delgado had Mercer's arms behind his back before the lieutenant could even react. You're all going to die up here, Mercer spat as they forced him down. You think she saved you? She just told them the game's up. They'll come now. They'll come all at once. You've got nothing, no comms, no reinforcements, no... We've got her, Fields said quietly. Mercer laughed, ugly and desperate. One woman with a rifle against 40. You have no idea what's coming down that mountain. Olivia crossed the room and crouched down in front of him, and she looked into his eyes with a calm so total it silenced even his fear. No, she said softly. You don't understand what's coming. You called 40 professionals down a mountain, and you think that's your advantage. But every one of them learned their trade from a book, and I helped write the book. They're going to do exactly what I taught people to do, and I'm going to be waiting at every single step because there isn't one move on that ridge I haven't made 100 times myself. She stood. You didn't ambush a supply base, Lieutenant. You walked 40 men into a mountain with the one person alive who knows exactly how to take them apart. And the worst part, the part you'll have a long time to think about, is that I didn't want this. I gave it up. I was done. I came up here to hold my husband's hand and drink bad coffee and be nobody at all. She turned toward the door, toward the base, toward the killers, already beginning their descent through the snow. You should have let me be nobody. Outside, high on the northern ridge, Colonel Alexander Voss lowered his radio and frowned at the silence coming back from the ops room. Mercer was supposed to have signaled by now. The trap was supposed to have closed. Something had gone wrong, and in 19 years of taking places apart, Voss had learned that when something went wrong this early, it was because someone down there had seen him coming. He raised his scope and swept the base, and for one moment across 900 meters of frozen air, his crosshairs passed over a woman in a winter jacket standing in a doorway, looking up at the ridge as though she could see him. As though she'd been waiting for him her whole life. Voss did not know her name. He did not know that she had trained the man who had trained him. He did not know that the quiet visitor he dismissed at dawn was about to become the single greatest mistake of his career. He only knew as he watched her turn and disappear into the base with the unhurried certainty of someone who already understood exactly how this was going to end, that the still cold feeling crawling up his spine was one he hadn't felt in a very long time, the feeling of being hunted. The first thing that broke was the silence. Olivia felt it before she heard it the way the air changes just before a storm, and she grabbed Fields by the collar and pulled her down behind the concrete wall a half second before the first rounds tore through the space where they'd been standing. "That's them realizing the trap didn't spring," Olivia said, calm as still water, while the world above their heads came apart. "Now they improvise. Now they get sloppy. Now we have a chance." "That's you calling that the chance," Fields shouted over the noise. "Compared to 10 minutes ago, this is Christmas." Ethan came down beside them at a dead run, Delgado and Nash behind him. All three of them low, all three of them white-faced. "Northern wall's gone," Ethan said. "They're coming through the gap. I've got 8 men still standing that I can find, and half of them are cut off in the barracks." "How many did you lose?" Olivia asked. The look on her husband's face answered before his mouth did. "I don't know yet," he said. "Kowalski, Reyes, the 2 on the eastern tower. Maybe more. It happened so fast I couldn't—" His voice cracked. "Liv, I've had this command for 2 years, and I never once heard a shot fired in anger, and now half my people are just gone, and I didn't see it coming." "You weren't supposed to see it coming," Olivia said, and she took his face in both her hands right there in the dirt while the air screamed above them. "That's the whole point of what they did. Don't you dare carry that. Not now. You can hate yourself later. Right now I need Captain Walker, not Ethan. Where's your colonel?" "Nobody's seen him since before the briefing." "Then he's dead or he's taken, and either way, this base is yours now," Olivia said, "which means you're going to listen to me, and I'm going to give you back your base, and we are going to do it together. Can you do that?" Ethan looked at his wife, this stranger wearing the face of the woman he loved, and he made the choice again, the same choice he'd made in the ops room, the choice to trust the locked room instead of fearing it. "Tell me what to do," he said. "First thing, everyone stop shooting at the ridge." She said it loud enough for all of them to hear. "Every round you send up that mountain is a round that tells them exactly where you are and does absolutely nothing, because you can't hit a man at 900 meters with a rifle you fired twice a year on a range. You're wasting ammunition and marking your own positions. From this second on, nobody fires at the high ground unless I tell them to. Understood?" "Then how do we fight them?" Nash said, and the kid's voice was shaking so hard the words barely held together. "We don't fight the men on the ridge," Olivia said. "We fight the men they send down. The ridge is bait. They want you looking up so their assault team can come in low. That's the oldest move there is. Look up, die down." She turned to Fields. "The armory. Did you get it open?" "Guard was Petrov's man," Fields said. "One of theirs. I did what you said. I walked away, but that means we can't get to the rifles. Olivia, we can't get to anything. They're sitting on our whole arsenal." "Good," Olivia said. "Good. They think they have our armory. They think we're rationing bullets. That's a weakness they'll count on, which makes it a weakness I can use." Olivia's mind was moving now at a speed that frightened even her 3 years of rust, burning off in seconds. And some buried part of her was screaming that this was wrong, that she'd sworn that she'd promised, and she shoved it down into the dark where it belonged. "How many magazines do the 5 of us have between us right now?" "Count them." Fast. They counted. 11 magazines, 2 grenades, Delgado's sidearm, Nash's rifle with a jammed feed he hadn't had time to clear. "That's not enough to hold a base," Ethan said quietly. "It's not enough to hold a base the way you're thinking about holding a base," Olivia said. "You're thinking like a defender. Walls, lines, positions. Forget all of it. There are 40 of them and 8 of us, and they've got the high ground and the armory and our comms. If we try to hold a line, we die in 20 minutes, so we're not going to hold anything. We're going to make 40 men believe they're being hunted by 100. Delgado, who had been silent this whole time, who had lost more friends in the last 10 minutes than in his entire career, finally spoke. "Lady," he said, "I don't know who the hell you are, and an hour ago you were laughing at my stories in the mess hall, and now you're talking about turning 8 people into 100, and I gotta be honest, I don't understand a word of it. Olivia looked at him. Sergeant Delgado, in the mess hall you asked how a guy like Ethan landed a woman like me. You want the real answer. Now you want to do this now. The real answer is that I killed a lot of men in a lot of countries, and one day I looked at what I'd become and I couldn't live inside it anymore. And I ran as far from that woman as I could get, and I ran straight into your captain, and he was the first person in years who looked at me and saw something other than a weapon. Her voice never rose, but every man there went still to hear it. I spent 3 years being someone gentle, and I would give anything to keep being her. But those men on that mountain came down here to kill my husband, and they woke up the woman I used to be, and now they are going to find out exactly why I had to run so far to escape her. That's the real answer. Now pick up your weapon and follow me, because the first thing we're going to do is take back the one thing that turns this whole fight around, which is, Olivia smiled, and it was not a warm smile, and Ethan felt a chill watching it appear on the face he'd kissed 1,000 times. The Eastern Tower, she said. It's the highest point inside the wire. Whoever holds it can see the whole approach. They took at first, which means they think it's theirs, which means they're not watching their own backs on it. There are 2 men up there. I'm going to take it back, and when I do, I'm going to have the one thing this whole fight has been missing. What's that? A rifle that can reach the ridge. The Eastern Tower sat 40 feet up on a steel frame, and the 2 men Voss had posted there were good at their jobs, which was exactly the problem. Because men who are good at their jobs get comfortable, and comfortable men stop watching the ladder behind them. Olivia went up that ladder in the dark without a sound. She had told the others to wait. She had told Ethan, specifically gripping his arm, that if he came up that ladder after her, he would get them both killed. That this was the one thing she could only do alone, that he had to trust her one more time. And Ethan, standing at the base of that tower, with his heart in his throat, had let her go, and it was the hardest thing he had ever done in his life, watching the woman he loved climb up into the dark toward 2 armed men carrying nothing but the pocket knife from her bag and the terrible thing she used to be. What happened up there took 19 seconds. Nobody below saw it. They only heard it, or rather they heard almost nothing. A soft scuffle, a single choked off sound, then silence, then a low whistle, the all clear she'd told them to listen for. When Ethan came up the ladder after her, the 2 men were down and would not be getting up, and Olivia was crouched at the tower rail with one of their rifles already in her hands, checking the optic, working the bolt, her fingers moving with a speed and certainty that made his stomach turn over. You're bleeding, he said. She glanced at the cut along her forearm like it belonged to someone else. It's not mine. Liv. It's not mine, Ethan. She didn't look up from the rifle. I need you to not look at me like that right now. I can't do this and also watch you learn to be afraid of me. So please, whatever's on your face, put it away until later. I promise you can have it later. Right now, I need my husband's eyes to look at me the way they did this morning, or I'm going to fall apart, and I cannot fall apart. Not tonight. And Ethan, God help him, understood. He crossed the tower and he crouched beside her and he put his hand on the back of her neck the way he did on ordinary mornings. And he said, "This morning you told the driver I could sleep through a hurricane." A sound came out of her that was half a laugh and half a sob. "You told him that?" "He told me you said it. He thought it was funny." Ethan pressed his forehead to her temple for 1 second. "I'm not afraid of you, Olivia. I'm never going to be afraid of you. I'm scared out of my mind about everything else, but not you. Now do whatever it is you're about to do, and I'll be right here, and when this is over, we're going to have the longest conversation of our marriage." "Deal," she whispered. Then she turned back to the rail and settled the rifle and became someone else entirely. The first shot Olivia Walker had fired in 3 years crossed 940 meters of frozen air and found the sniper on the northern ridge who had been watching the base through his scope, and the men down below in the snow. The assault team creeping toward the barracks heard their overwatch go silent and did not immediately understand why. The second shot 12 seconds later found the spotter beside him. And on the ridge, Colonel Alexander Voss, who had felt the crawling on his spine an hour ago and dismissed it, watched 2 of his best men die in the space of a breath, and finally understood that the woman in the winter jacket had not been a housewife at all. "Report," he said into his radio, and there was an edge in his voice his men had never heard. "Kessler and Adnan are down," came the answer, thin and disbelieving. "Both of them. Headshots. Colonel, they were on the reverse slope. Nobody could see them from the base. Nobody. The angle's impossible. It's not impossible, Voss said slowly, lowering his own scope, feeling the whole shape of his beautiful plan begin to tilt beneath him. It's only impossible if you're thinking like a soldier. Someone down there is thinking like an instructor. He keyed the radio again. All units, someone in that base can reach the ridge. Assume every high position is compromised. Assume you are being watched. And find me whoever's on that eastern tower, because whoever it is just became the only thing standing between us and this base. Down in the tower, Olivia worked the bolt and did not celebrate. 2, Ethan said quietly beside her. You got 2. I got their eyes on the north, Olivia said. That's all. He'll have more shooters and he'll pull them off the skyline now, get them into cover, and I won't get another gift like that. But it bought us something. She was already scanning, already reading the base below like a page of text. Look at the assault team by the barracks. They stopped. They're waiting. You know why? Ethan looked. In the confusion below, 6 men who had been moving toward the barracks in a tight professional column had gone to ground and were not moving. Because their overwatch went dark, Olivia said, and now they don't know if it's safe to move because the whole reason they were confident was that someone up high was watching their backs. Take away the eyes on the ridge, and 40 confident professionals become 40 nervous men who suddenly can't trust the dark. That's the fight, Ethan. That's the entire fight, not bullets. Confidence. I take theirs, I give it to your men, and the whole thing turns. Then what do? Now we make them think there are more of me. Olivia turned from the rail. Get me Fields, and I need every soldier you can still reach spread out along the southern buildings, 1 man to a position, nobody together, and every 30 seconds, one of them fires a single shot at a different part of that ridge and then moves. 1 shot, move, 1 shot, move, from 10 different positions. You said not to shoot at the ridge. I said don't shoot at the ridge to kill. This is different. This is to lie. I want Voss up there counting muzzle flashes, and I want him to count so many that he thinks he's facing a full defensive company that was waiting for him. I want him to think Mercer sold him out and led him into a trap. I want him afraid. Her eyes were very bright now, very cold, because a frightened commander makes his men do frightened things, and frightened men in the open are the only kind I can reach from up here. Fields came up the ladder, saw the 2 dead men, saw Olivia holding a sniper rifle over the rail, and stopped dead. You did that, she said. The shots on the ridge, that was you. That was me. Fields stared at her for a long moment. Then quietly, in the mess hall you told them you raised 2 younger brothers. I did raise 2 younger brothers. And the rest of it? The rest of it is what I've been running from for 3 years, Olivia said. Amy, I need you to do something, and I need you to understand it might be the hardest thing you've ever done. I need you to go back down there and walk from position to position, under fire, and keep those men from freezing. You're going to lose some of them tonight. That's already decided, and there's nothing you or I can do to change the number, only who it is and how many. But if the men who are left stop moving, we lose all of them. You keep them moving. You did it for 14 months up here, noticing things nobody noticed, keeping this place running while nobody thanked you for it. Tonight, that quiet thing you do is going to save everyone's life. Can you carry that? And Corporal Amy Fields, 26 years old, who had spent 14 months being overlooked on a base at the top of the world, straightened her spine and said, Yes, ma'am. Then go, and Amy, don't die. I've decided I like you, and I don't like very many people. Fields almost smiled. Then she was gone back down the ladder into the dark. For the next hour, Black Ridge Base became a kind of ghost story. Olivia's plan worked the way she said it would, and watching it work was the strangest thing Ethan had ever witnessed, because his wife wasn't fighting a battle so much as conducting one, sitting up in that tower, reading the whole board and moving pieces with a voice and a rifle. The soldiers below fired their single shots and moved and fired again. 10 men making the noise of 100 and up on the ridge. Voss's men began to hesitate, began to second guess, began to whisper to each other over the radio that something was wrong, that they'd walked into more than they were told. And every time one of them broke cover in the confusion, every time a man moved, when he should have stayed still, Olivia was waiting. She didn't miss. She never celebrated. That was the thing Ethan couldn't stop noticing. Each time she fired and a man on the mountain went still, Something in her got a little quieter, a little further away, and he understood that every shot was costing her something. He couldn't see that she was spending pieces of herself to save them, and that the woman who came down from this tower was not going to be exactly the same woman who went up it. "You're keeping count," he said at one point, watching her face between shots. "In your head, you're counting them." "I count all of them," Olivia said. "I've always counted all of them. Every single one. I could tell you the number from 9 years ago. I could tell you what the weather was like for each one." She worked the bolt. "That's why I stopped Ethan. Not because I couldn't do it, because I could do it, and I never forgot a single face, and one day the counting got louder than everything else in my head, and I knew if I did it one more time, I wouldn't be able to find my way back out." She sighted down the scope. "And now here I am, doing it, and the counting's already loud again." "You found your way out before," Ethan said. "You found your way out to me." She didn't answer. She fired. Down on the ridge, another man went still, and Olivia's jaw tightened, and Ethan reached over in the dark and put his hand flat between her shoulder blades and just held it there, and neither of them said anything, and it was the most honest moment of their entire marriage. Then the radio at the dead man's belt crackled, and a voice came through it, and it was speaking English, and it was speaking to them. "Eastern Tower," the voice said, calm, cultured, almost warm. "I know you can hear me. You've been busy up there." Olivia went very still. "That's him," she said quietly. "That's the commander." "You should answer him," Ethan said. "Find out what he wants." "He wants to hear my voice," Olivia said. "He wants to know what he's fighting. The second I answer, I give him information. Who I am, what I sound like, whether I'm rattled." She looked at the radio like it was a snake. But he also just made a mistake, because a commander who has time to chat is a commander who's stopped attacking, and every second he spends talking is a second your men aren't dying. She picked up the radio. "You've lost 7 men," she said into it. 2 on the North Ridge, 5 in the yard. "You're going to lose more. You should have kept your snipers off the skyline. That was sloppy. Whoever trained you should be ashamed." There was a pause, a long one. Then Voss laughed softly, and the sound of it made the hair stand up on Ethan's arms. "Whoever trained me," Voss said. "Yes, let's talk about that, because I've been sitting up here trying to understand how a supply base at the end of the world put 2 of my best shooters in the snow at 900 meters. And there's only one answer that makes sense, and it's an answer I don't like at all." Another pause. "There's a school in the American desert where they make instructors. And there was a name that came up years ago when I was learning my trade from a man who learned his from someone he wouldn't stop talking about. A woman. They said she was the best they ever produced, and then she vanished. They said she just walked away one day, and nobody ever heard from her again." His voice dropped. "Tell me your name." Olivia's hand was steady on the radio, but Ethan could see her face, and her face was not steady at all. "My name doesn't matter," she said. "Reyes," Voss said. "That was the name. Sergeant Reyes, the ghost of the schoolhouse, the one they whispered about." Silence. "Is it you? Is it actually you up in that tower? Because if it is, then this is the strangest night of my life, and I've had some strange ones." Ethan was staring at his wife. Reyes, her name before she was Walker. The name she'd told the whole ops room an hour ago, and now a killer on a mountain was speaking it into the dark like a prayer, and Olivia's face had gone the color of the snow. "He knows me," she whispered, and for the first time all night there was fear in it. "Ethan, he doesn't know me, but he knows of me. That means the people I train the people he trained. That means somewhere down that line I taught the man who taught the man who's coming to kill us. I made this. Whatever's coming down that mountain, some piece of it, I made it." "You didn't make this," Ethan said fiercely. "You taught Marines to defend their country. What some foreign killer did with it 3 steps down the line is not on you, do you hear me? That's not how it works. You don't get to carry that." But she was already carrying it. He could see her carrying it. And Voss up on the ridge could hear the silence and understood exactly what it meant and pressed on it like a man pressing on a wound. "I think it is you," Voss said softly. "I can hear it. You're wondering, aren't you, if the men down here move the way they do because of something you set in motion a long time ago. You're wondering if you're fighting your own reflection." A pause. Here is a thing I have learned, Sergeant Reyes. The best of us don't retire. We just wait. You've been waiting 3 years for a night like this, whether you knew it or not. And now here it is, and here you are doing the only thing you were ever truly good at. You can pretend you hate it, but we both know the truth. Nobody shoots the way you just shot and hates it. You've missed it. And the terrible thing, the thing that made Olivia's hands shake on the radio, was that some small buried part of her knew he was right. She keyed the radio. "Come down and find out," she said, and clicked it off before he could answer, and dropped it on the tower floor like it had burned her. "Liv," Ethan said. "He's in my head," she said. "That's what he's doing. That's what I'd do. Get in the enemy commander's head, make them doubt, make them hesitate. He's using me against me, and it's working, and I taught the philosophy that he's using, and I can't—" She stopped, breathed, forced the ice back over the crack. No, he wants me thinking about who I used to be. He wants me lost in it. That's the whole play. So I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to think about you and about those kids down there, Nash and Fields, and I'm going to do my job." She lifted the rifle. "But Ethan, when this is over, if I get quiet, if I go somewhere in my head and I don't come back for a while, you have to promise me you'll wait, because he's going to leave a mark tonight, that man, whether he lives or dies, and I'm going to need you to be patient with me the way you've always been patient with me." "I'll wait as long as it takes," Ethan said. "I waited 3 years to find out who you are. I can wait a little longer to help you live with it." She almost broke then. He saw it, but she turned back to the rail instead, and the battle went on. For a while it went their way. The ghost story held. Voss's men rattled and second-guessing gave Olivia targets, and she took them, and the number on the mountain dwindled, and down below, Ethan's soldiers began to believe for the first time all night that they might actually live to see the morning. Then Voss did the thing Olivia had been dreading. He stopped attacking, and he started thinking. The single shots from the southern buildings had been fooling him into believing he faced a full company. So he did the one thing that would break the illusion. He sent 3 men quietly in the dark, not toward the base, but around it to a flanking position where they could look down the length of the southern buildings and count with their own eyes how many defenders were actually there. Olivia caught the movement too late. "No," she breathed, tracking them through the scope. No, he's checking the count. He's sending men to count the muzzle flashes. If they get to that ridge, they'll see there's only 10 of us, and the whole lie falls apart. "Ethan, get on the radio to Fields. Tell her to pull everyone back into the central buildings right now before those 3 men get eyes on the line. The comms are dead. Liv, we don't have." "Then someone has to run it to her." Olivia's mind raced. It's 100 meters of open ground between here and the southern line, and there are 3 trained men about to have a clear shot down the whole length of it. Whoever runs that message is running through the exact place those men are moving to cover. Ethan was already standing. "I'll go." "No." "Olivia." "No." She grabbed his wrist. "Listen to me. If you go and one of those 3 men is even half awake, you die in the open and then I lose you. And this base loses its commander in the same second, and I promise you I will not be able to keep doing this if I watch you die. I need you here. I need your voice on that ridgeline, rallying men who won't follow a stranger. That's not sentiment, that's tactics. The commander doesn't run the message. The commander commands. Then who runs it?" And a small voice from the bottom of the ladder said, "I will." It was Nash. Private Tommy Nash, 19 years old, who had knocked over his coffee, shaking her hand that afternoon, who had been so scared an hour ago he could barely speak. He'd climbed the tower to bring them the last of the ammunition, and he'd heard everything, and he was standing there now with his jaw set. "Nash," Ethan said. "No. Captain, respectfully, it's got to be somebody. And it can't be you, and it can't be her, and Delgado's too big and slow to make that run, and everybody knows it." The kid's voice shook, but he didn't back down. "I'm the fastest guy on this base. I hold the base record on the 2-mile. Everybody jokes about it. Well, tonight it's not a joke. Let me run it. Let me do the one thing I'm actually good at." Olivia looked at this boy, this child, and everything in her wanted to say no. But she had told Fields the truth an hour ago. The hardest truth there was that the number was already decided, and only the names and the how were still open, and she knew with the cold clarity that had ruined her once already that the boy was right. It had to be someone. And he was the fastest. And a slower runner meant a longer time in the open, meant a worse chance, meant she'd be trading his likely death for someone else's certain one. Tommy, she said, and she used his first name the way she'd use Fields, so he'd know it mattered. Listen to me very carefully. You don't run in a straight line. You never run in a straight line in the open. It's the first thing that gets a man killed, because a straight line is a predictable line, and a predictable line is an easy shot. You run 3 steps, you cut 3 steps, you cut hard and random. No rhythm, never let them guess where your next step lands. You keep low. And when you get to Fields, you don't stop to explain, you say 4 words. Pull back, central buildings. Then you drop and you stay down. Can you do that? 3 steps and cut, Nash said. Low, 4 words, drop. Say it again. 3 steps and cut, low, pull back, central buildings, drop. Go on my mark, Olivia said, settling the rifle sighting toward the dark ground the 3 flankers were moving through. I'm going to be watching the whole way, and if any one of those 3 so much as lifts his head, I'm going to make him regret it. But I can't stop all 3, so you run like the fastest boy in the world, Tommy Nash, because tonight you are. She took a breath. You've got family. My mom, Nash said, back in Ohio. Then you run for your mom in Ohio. Not for me, not for the captain, not for the base. For her, so you can call her when the sun comes up. That's what you run for. She cited. Ready. Ready. Go. Nash went over the tower rail and down the ladder like water and hit the open ground running, and it was the longest 100 meters of Ethan Walker's life. The boy ran the way Olivia told him, 3 steps and a hard cut, 3 steps and a cut. No rhythm, low and fast, and up in the tower, Olivia tracked the dark ground where the 3 flankers were, her finger on the trigger, her breath slow, waiting. Halfway across, one of the flankers heard him. Olivia saw the man rise, saw the barrel come up, and she fired before the thought fully formed, and the man dropped, and Nash cut again and kept running, not even knowing how close he'd come, and the other 2 flankers now knew exactly where the shot had come from, which was the tower, which was her. They've got you, Ethan said. Liv, they know it's the tower now. Get down. Not yet. She was tracking the second flanker who was turning toward the tower, bringing his own weapon up. Nash first. Nash reached the southern line. She saw him drop into cover beside Fields. She saw Fields' head come up, saw the corporal grab the boy, saw the message pass between them. And then she saw Fields moving down the line position to position, pulling the men back toward the center, and the ghost story collapsed on purpose, folded up neat and safe into the central buildings a half second before Voss's flankers could ever have counted it. The boy had made it. The message had landed. And then the second flanker fired at the tower, and the round hit the steel rail 8 inches from Olivia's head and screamed off into the dark, and she was already rolling, already moving, and Ethan grabbed her and pulled her flat as 3 more rounds walked across the tower where she'd just been. They've ranged us, Olivia said, breathing hard, pressed flat against the tower floor beside her husband. We can't stay up here. Once they've got the range on a fixed position, it's just arithmetic, they'll take it apart. We have to move, and we have to move now, and I have to take this rifle with me because it's the only thing keeping us alive. Where do we go? She was already thinking, already 3 moves ahead. Somewhere they won't expect. Somewhere high enough to still reach the ridge, but not the place they've already ranged. She looked at him. Ethan, how well do you know this base? Better than they do. I've walked every inch of it for 2 years. Then that's our edge. That's the only edge left, Dario. They studied this place from satellite photos in a trader's notes, but you lived here. You know the sight lines, they don't. You know the places a photo doesn't show. She gripped his arm. You've been letting me run this whole fight, and you've been right to because I know the enemy. But I don't know this ground, you do. So from right now, it's both of us. I tell you what I need to do to them, and you tell me where on this base I can do it. Partners, all the way to the end. Can you do that? And Ethan Walker, who had spent 3 years loving a woman with a locked room inside her, who had watched that room open tonight into something vast and terrible and beautiful, felt the last of his fear for her burn away and something fierce take its place. Follow me, he said. I know exactly where you need to be. They went down the ladder together into the dark, into the rest of the night, And up on the ridge, Colonel Alexander Voss watched the eastern tower go quiet and understood that the ghost had moved. And for the first time in 19 years of taking places apart, he felt the cold certainty that he was no longer the hunter. "Find her," he said into the radio, and his voice had lost every trace of its warmth. "Whatever it costs, find the woman in the tower. Because as long as she's alive and thinking this base does not fall, and I did not come all this way to lose to a ghost who was supposed to have retired." Down below, moving through the dark behind her husband, Olivia Walker heard nothing of this. But she felt it the way she'd felt the first shots coming, the way she'd felt the danger the moment she stepped off the truck that afternoon. She felt the whole weight of the mountain turn toward her 40 men and a commander who knew her name, all of them, looking now for one woman. And the woman they were looking for, the ghost of the schoolhouse, the wife who came to visit her husband for a quiet weekend, wiped the blood that wasn't hers off her hands and gripped the rifle she'd sworn she would never hold again, and followed the man she loved into the dark to finish what 40 strangers had started. She did not know yet that the hardest choice of the night was still ahead of her. She did not know that before the sun came up, Voss would find the one thing she could not shoot her way out of the one weakness she'd carried onto this mountain without ever knowing it was a weakness at all. She only knew that her hands, after 3 years of silence, had remembered everything, and that terrified her more than any man on any ridge ever could. The place Ethan led her to was a maintenance catwalk above the fuel storage sheds, a spot no satellite photo would ever show as a firing position, because from above, it looked like nothing at all, just pipes and steel and a low roof, and that was exactly why Olivia loved it the moment she saw it. "This is it," she said, settling into the shadow of the pipes, laying the rifle across a length of cold steel. "This is perfect. They ranged the tower. They're watching the tower. Nobody's watching a fuel shed." She looked at her husband with something close to wonder. "You just handed me the whole ridge. You know that from here I can see 3 of their positions, and they can't see me at all." "I told you I knew the ground," Ethan said. "You did. I should have listened 3 hours ago." She sighted down toward the ridge, reading the mountain again, updating the whole picture in her head. "Okay, here's where we are. He started with 40. I've put down 9, maybe 10. Nash's flanker makes 11. That leaves him around 30, but they're scattered now and they're scared, and their commander just realized he's not fighting a company. He's fighting one person and a handful of your soldiers. That's good and it's bad." "How is that bad?" "Because a scared man attacking is dangerous, but a scared man who's just been embarrassed is worse," Olivia said. "Voss came up this mountain thinking this was going to be easy. Now he's lost a quarter of his force to a ghost, and he knows who I am, and that means this stopped being a job for him about an hour ago and became something personal. Personal makes men patient. Personal makes them smart. He's going to stop throwing men at us and start hunting me specifically, and a hunter is much harder to fight than an attacker." As if the mountain had heard her, the shooting stopped. For the first time since the northern wall fell, Black Ridge Base went quiet. No rifles, no shouting, just the wind and the cold and the terrible waiting that Olivia knew better than anyone alive. "Why'd they stop?" Ethan whispered. "Because he's thinking," Olivia said, "same as me. He pulled his men back to figure out how to get me. This is the part of the fight nobody talks about. The silence. It's worse than the shooting. The shooting means you know where they are. The silence means they're deciding." She didn't take her eye from the scope. "Get on the radio to Fields. Find out who we've still got and who we've lost. We need a real count before he moves again. And we need it fast because that silence out there has a clock on it." Ethan crawled back to the ladder and made the connection, whispering into the handset one of Voss's own men had dropped. And while he did it, Olivia held the mountain in her scope and let herself feel for just one moment the size of what was happening. She had come here to hold her husband's hand. Instead, she was killing men in the dark and counting their faces, and the count was already up past 3 years of silence and climbing, and some cold engine in her chest had turned over and started running, and she did not know how to turn it off again. She had told Ethan the truth in the tower. Voss was in her head, not the way he thought with his cultured voice and his talk of ghosts. Deeper than that, he'd said one thing that had lodged in her like a splinter. The best of us don't retire. We just wait. She'd spent 3 years believing she'd changed, believing that Olivia Walker was a different person than Olivia Reyes. And in one night, the mountain had shown her that the woman she used to be had never gone anywhere at all. She'd just been sleeping, waiting. And the ease with which she'd woken her up, the way her hands remembered, the way the counting started again like she'd never stopped terrified her more than anything Voss could ever do. Liv. Ethan crawled back to her. His face was gray. The count. Tell me. Fields is good. Nash is good. He made it back. Delgado's got a graze on his shoulder, but he's up. We've got 6 people left who can still fight, including the 2 of us. He swallowed. We started the day with a garrison of 41. Fields thinks we've got 7 still alive. Everyone else is... His voice failed. Everyone else is gone or missing Liv. 34 people. I ate breakfast with 34 people this morning who aren't Ethan. She took her eye off the scope for 1 second, just one, and put her hand flat against his chest over his heart. Not now, I told you. You can have all of it later, every name, every face. I'll sit with you for that grief as long as it takes, and I mean that. But if you open that door right now, it will swallow you, and I need you, and those 7 people need you. Put it in the box, just for a few more hours. Can you do that for me? Ethan closed his eyes. When he opened them, something had hardened the way it hardens in a man who's decided to survive a thing so he can fall apart properly on the other side of it. The box, he said. Okay, the box. That's my husband. And then Voss's voice came back on the dropped radio, and it had changed. The warmth was gone. What was left was quieter and colder and much more dangerous. Sergeant Reyes, Voss said, I want to propose something to you. Are you listening? Olivia looked at the radio. She looked at Ethan. Then she picked it up. I'm listening. You've done extraordinary work tonight. I mean that with complete sincerity. I have lost 11 men to you, some of the best I've ever trained, and I am not a man who says that lightly. A pause. But you and I both know how this ends. You have 6 or 7 people. I have 30. You have 1 rifle, and whatever's left in the armory you can't reach. Time is on my side. Every hour that passes, you get more tired, and tired shooters miss. So here is my proposal. Surrender the base, and I will let your people live. All of them. You have my word. Your word, Olivia said flatly. You don't believe me. That's fair. So let me give you a reason to. Voss's voice dropped lower. I have your colonel. Olivia went still. Beside her, Ethan's head came up sharply. He's alive, Voss continued. We took him before the briefing. He's the reason Mercer could move it up, the reason the room was gathered. Colonel Harmon, 58 years old, 2 daughters, a wife named Carol, he talks about when he thinks no one's listening. He's alive, Sergeant Reyes, and he's here with me, and I will put him on this radio right now to prove it, and then you're going to make a choice. There was a shuffling sound. Then a new voice, ragged, exhausted, but unmistakably a man in command, even in defeat. Whoever you are, Colonel Harmon said, you do not surrender this base. That's a direct order. I don't care what they do to me. You do not give them Black Ridge. Do you understand me? Whoever you are up there doing this, you keep fighting, and you do not trade this base for 1 old man that's in... The radio cut off. He's a brave man, Voss said, returning. Foolish but brave. Here is your choice, Sergeant. In 30 minutes, you will signal your surrender, or I will execute Colonel Harmon on this ridge, and then I will come down and take the base anyway, and I will not be gentle about it. 30 minutes. The clock is running. The radio went dead. Olivia set it down very slowly. He found it, she said quietly. Found what? The thing I can't shoot my way out of. Her hands, which had been steady all night, were not quite steady now. I can win the firefight, Ethan. Given time, I can whittle 30 men down to nothing from up here. I know I can. But I can't put a bullet through this. He's found a hostage and a clock, and now every choice I make gets weighed against a man's life. And that's the one kind of fight I was never good at, because the whole reason I quit was that I couldn't stand what the weighing did to me. You heard the colonel, Ethan said. He gave a direct order. Don't surrender the base. I know what he said. Brave men always say that. Olivia pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes for 1 second. But it's not really a choice, is it? Because if I surrender, Voss kills everyone anyway. I know he does. I've seen his kind 100 times. The word of a man who lets 40 killers loose on a supply base is worth exactly nothing. And if I don't surrender, he kills Harmon, and I have to sit up here and listen to it and add 1 more face to a count that's already too long. She lowered her hands. He's not giving me a choice between 2 options. He's giving me a choice between two kinds of guilt. And he knows it. That's the cruelty of it. That's exactly what I would do. Then we don't play his game, Ethan said. We change it. Olivia looked at her husband. What? You keep telling me you know how these men think because you train the people who train them. Fine. So he expects one of two things. He expects us to surrender, or he expects us to sit here and refuse and let Harmon die. Those are the only two moves on the board he built, so we don't make either one. Ethan's jaw was set. There's a third move. We go get the colonel. Ethan, he's on the ridge surrounded by... You told me an hour ago that our only edge is that I know this ground better than they do. His eyes were bright now. Well, I know something Voss doesn't. There's an old service tunnel that runs from the fuel sheds right under us, out under the northern wall, and up into the base of the ridge. It was cut 40 years ago to run fuel lines up to a weather station that doesn't exist anymore. It's not on any current map. It floods, and nobody uses it, and half the base doesn't know it's there. But I do. I found it my first month here. He gripped her arm. It comes out behind the ridge, behind where Voss is holding the colonel. If somebody went through that tunnel while you kept Voss looking down at the base, they could come up behind him. Olivia stared at her husband, and something moved through her that was almost hope and almost terror, because she saw immediately that the plan was good, and she saw immediately what it would cost. Somebody would have to go through that tunnel alone, she said slowly, in the dark, into the middle of 30 men, to pull one hostage out, while I stayed up here and covered them from 900 meters, unable to reach them, the second they went over the top of the ridge and out of my sight line. She shook her head. The person who goes through that tunnel is almost certainly not coming back, Ethan. You understand that it's a suicide run with maybe a 1 in 10 chance. I know, Ethan said. That's why I'm the one who's going. No. Olivia. No, absolutely not. We had this exact fight 2 hours ago with Nash, and I let a 19-year-old boy run through open ground because it was the only tactical answer, and I have been sick about it ever since. And I am not sending my husband alone into 30 men. Her voice cracked wide open. I came here to save you. Do you understand that? Not the base, not the colonel. You, every single thing I've done tonight, every man I've put in the snow, every piece of myself I spent it to keep you breathing. And now you want me to hand you a rifle and watch you crawl into a tunnel to die? I can't. I won't. Ask me for anything else. Ethan took her face in his hands the way she'd taken his, and for a long moment the whole war fell away. And it was just the two of them, a husband and a wife on a freezing mountain, 30 minutes from the end of everything. Liv, he said gently. Listen to me. You spent 3 years believing your past made you dangerous. You believed the skills that made you valuable were the same ones that made you impossible to love. I know you did. I watched you flinch away from yourself 100 times, and I never understood why until tonight. He pressed his forehead to hers. But here's what I finally understand. You didn't run from those skills because you're dangerous. You ran from them because you cared too much about what they cost. That's not weakness. That's the opposite. And I fell in love with a woman who cared that deeply, and I am not going to sit up on a fuel shed and let her spend the last piece of her soul trading one guilt for another when there's a third way, and I'm the only one who can walk it. You'll die, she whispered. Maybe. Or maybe you'll be up here with the best rifle on this mountain and the clearest eye God ever gave anyone watching over me the whole way. Maybe I'll walk that tunnel knowing my wife is 900 meters away and she has never once missed a shot that mattered. He kissed her forehead. You've been protecting all of us all night, Olivia. Let me protect one person. Let me get that old man's daughters their father back. And let me do it knowing you're watching my back, because there is no one on earth I would rather have watching my back than you. And Olivia Walker, who had spent 9 years learning how to take life and 3 years learning how to build one, understood that she had lost this argument because everything he said was true. And because the thing that made her love him was the exact thing that was about to send him into the dark. If you die, she said, and her voice was barely there, I will never forgive you. And I will hunt every man on that mountain to the last one, and I will not count their faces. I will enjoy it, and it will destroy me, and it will be your fault. So you don't get to die. Those are my terms. You come back to me. You don't have permission to do anything else. Then I'll come back, Ethan said. I promise. Don't promise. Promises are how people die. She grabbed the front of his coat and pulled him in and kissed him hard once the way you kiss someone when the words won't hold everything. Just come back. Now tell me exactly where that tunnel comes out down to the meter, because from the second you go over that ridge and out of my sight, you're on your own, and I need to know every place I can reach and every place I can't. They worked it out fast, heads bent together over the dropped radio, and Ethan's memory of the ground and the clock in Olivia's head counted down toward Voss's deadline, and around them the base held its breath. The plan was simple, which was the only kind of plan that survived contact. Ethan would take Delgado because Delgado was steady, and because two men had a better chance than one of pulling a wounded hostage out. They'd go through the tunnel while Olivia signaled a fake surrender to buy the time, drawing every eye on that ridge, down toward the base, toward her, toward the woman Voss wanted more than anything. She'd be the lightning rod. She'd make herself the most interesting thing on the mountain so that 30 men would forget to watch their own backs. And when Ethan and Delgado came up behind the ridge, Olivia would give them the one thing she'd been giving her own people all night. She'd turn the enemy's confidence into fear. One more thing, Olivia said as Ethan prepared to go. When you get up there, when you find the colonel, there's going to be a moment where you can either grab him and run or stop and fight. You grab him and you run. Every time. You do not get greedy. You do not try to take Voss. You do not try to be a hero. You get the old man and you get gone, and you let me handle the mountain. Heroes who get greedy are just corpses who took an extra second. Say it back to me. Grab the colonel. Run. Don't get greedy. And if it goes wrong, if they see you, if it all comes apart, she held his eyes, you drop flat and you scream my name as loud as you can, and you trust me to do the impossible thing, because I have been doing impossible things all night, and I will do one more for you if it's the last thing my hands ever do. Do you believe me? I believe you, Ethan said. I've believed you since the ops room. You're the most dangerous person on this mountain, and you're the woman I love. And those two things were never a contradiction, and I'm sorry it took a war for me to see it. Go, she said, because if he said one more true thing, she was going to break. Go before I change my mind and chain you to this shed. He went. He and Delgado dropped down the ladder and into the black mouth of the tunnel, and Olivia watched the last of her husband disappear into the dark under the mountain, and then she was alone on the fuel shed with a rifle and a radio and 30 men to fool. She keyed the radio. Voss, she said, I'll surrender. There was a pause, then warm again satisfied the sound of a man who believed he'd won. I knew you'd see reason, Sergeant. You always were the smart one, weren't you, even in the stories? Come down. Bring your people. Hands where we can see them, and I'll... Not yet, Olivia said. I've got terms. You're not in a position to have terms. I've killed 11 of your men tonight, and I haven't broken a sweat, and you've got 20 minutes left on your own clock before you have to make good on killing a colonel you'd much rather trade. I'd say I'm in an excellent position to have terms. She let that sit. Here they are. You want the base, fine. But I don't trust you within 900 meters of my people, so this is how it's going to go. You're going to bring the colonel into the northern gap yourself, in person. Just you and 2 men. You show me he's alive, you release him, and then I bring my people out, and you can have your base. That's the deal. You personally at the gap with the colonel. Take it or leave it. She was buying time. Every word was time. Every demand was Voss thinking instead of watching the ridge behind him, where 2 men were even now crawling up out of the earth. And she was doing the other thing too, the thing Voss wouldn't see until it was too late, drawing him down off the high ground, pulling the commander himself toward the gap, away from the men holding the colonel, thinning the guard around the one person Ethan had gone to save. You're stalling, Voss said, and there was a new sharpness in it. I'm negotiating the surrender of a military installation, Olivia said. It's supposed to take a minute. What's the matter, Colonel? You in a hurry? Somewhere else you need to be. She smiled into the dark. Or are you starting to wonder why the ghost who's been 3 steps ahead of you all night is suddenly so eager to talk? The silence on the other end lasted exactly 1 second too long. And in that 1 second, Olivia Walker knew that Alexander Voss had just understood. Move, Voss barked, not to her, to his men, his voice exploding off the radio. She's stalling for a reason. Check the perimeter check behind us. Check the... Olivia dropped the radio and put her eye to the scope, and there, coming up over the back of the ridge, exactly where Ethan had said the tunnel would spit them out, were two figures, her husband and Delgado, and between them and the colonel were four of Voss's men who had just started to turn. The whole night came down to the next 4 seconds. Olivia did not think. Thinking was too slow. Her hands did what 9 years had taught them, what 3 years of silence had never erased, and she fired and worked the bolt and fired and worked the bolt 4 times in under 4 seconds, faster than she had fired in her entire life, each shot, crossing 900 meters to arrive a heartbeat before Voss's men could bring their weapons around, and 4 men who had been about to kill her husband went down into the snow, and Ethan and Delgado were through the gap and on the colonel before the echoes finished rolling off the mountain. "Now, you run," Olivia breathed, not on the radio, just to herself, to him across all that frozen air. "Grab him and run. Ethan, run, run." And through the scope, she saw them get the colonel up between them, saw the old man's legs moving alive, and saw the three of them turn back toward the tunnel mouth, and for one soaring, impossible second, Olivia Walker believed she had done it, believed she was going to get all of them home. Then Voss appeared at the top of the ridge. He came up out of a fold in the ground. She couldn't see a place her scope had never covered, exactly the kind of dead ground a master would know to use, and he had a weapon up, and he was between Ethan and the tunnel, and Olivia had no shot because her husband was directly in her line, and the geometry that had saved them all night had suddenly turned against her. "Ethan," she screamed out loud, uselessly, 900 meters too far away to do anything but watch. "Ethan, drop, drop." But he couldn't hear her. He was too far. He had the colonel's arm over his shoulders, and he was running for the tunnel, and he did not see the man rising up on his flank. And Olivia had the rifle to her eye, and no shot, no shot. Her husband's body blocking the only line to the man about to kill him, and every skill she had ever learned, every terrible gift that had made her a legend, all of it worth nothing in this one instant because she could not shoot through the person she was trying to save. And in that instant, Olivia Walker understood the true cruelty of what Voss had done, the thing she'd said out loud on the fuel shed without knowing how right she was. He'd found the one thing she couldn't shoot her way out of. Not the hostage, not the clock. Love. He'd found the exact place where the greatest shooter on the mountain became a helpless woman watching her husband die, because the thing that made her fight was the same thing that made her unable to. Delgado saw Voss. Delgado, with the graze on his shoulder, with a friend to save and a captain to protect, did the only thing there was time to do. He shoved Ethan and the colonel forward, hard toward the tunnel, out of the line, and he turned to put his own body between Voss and the men he'd sworn to protect. And for half a second, the line was clear. Olivia fired. The round took Voss high in the shoulder and spun him around and dropped him behind the fold of ground before she could fire again, and she didn't know if he was dead or only hit. But it didn't matter, because in that same half second, Ethan and the colonel tumbled into the tunnel, mouth and out of sight, and Delgado dove in after them, and they were gone down into the earth out of the killing ground, alive. Alive. Olivia sat back from the rifle, and her whole body was shaking, and she realized she'd stopped breathing somewhere in the last 10 seconds and had to force the air back into her lungs in great ragged pulls, and her hands, her steady, terrible, gifted hands, were trembling so hard she could barely hold the weapon. She'd done it. She'd gotten them out. Ethan was alive. But she'd learned something in those 4 seconds that she would carry for the rest of her life, something worse than any count of faces, and it was this. All her skill, all her legend, all the reasons men whispered her name on distant mountains, none of it could protect the one person she loved most in the moment that mattered most. Her gift had a hole in the center of it, exactly the size and shape of her own heart. And Voss, wounded or dead, had shown it to her, had made her look at it, had made her understand that the woman she used to be and the woman she'd become were not two people after all, but one person with one unbearable weakness, and that weakness was the very thing that made her worth saving. The radio crackled at her feet. She picked it up with shaking hands, expecting Voss, expecting one more cruel word from a dying man. Instead, it was Ethan. "Liv." His voice was breathless, alive, cracking with adrenaline and something else. "Liv, we're in the tunnel. We've got him. The colonel's hit, but he's breathing. We're coming home. Delgado's good. We're all good. You did it. You impossible, incredible woman, you did it. I don't know how, but you—" "I almost didn't," she said, and her voice broke completely. 3 years and one night and 34 dead soldiers, all pouring through the crack at once. Ethan, I almost lost you. He was right there and you were in my line and I couldn't shoot. And if Delgado hadn't, but he did, and you did, and we're coming home to you right now. A pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentle, the voice from ordinary mornings, the voice that had built her a life. Breathe, live, just breathe, whatever you're feeling up there. Whatever door just opened, you don't have to hold it alone anymore. I'm coming up out of the ground in about 4 minutes, and I'm going to hold you, and we're going to figure out the rest of this mountain together, and then we're going to go home. Okay, just hold on 4 more minutes. Olivia pressed the radio to her chest and closed her eyes and let herself shake alone on a fuel shed on top of the world with a wounded killer somewhere on the ridge below, and a war not yet finished, and the whole broken weight of who she was pressing down on her at last. 4 minutes. She could hold on 4 minutes. She'd held on 3 years. She could hold on 4 minutes more. But somewhere on that ridge in the dead ground, where her scope couldn't reach, Colonel Alexander Voss was not dead. He was bleeding into the snow, with a shattered shoulder and a rage that had burned past anything professional, past the job, past the money, into something purely personal. And he was reaching for his radio with his one good hand, and he was about to make the last and most desperate move of the night, the move Olivia had not planned for, the move that would force her to choose one final time between the woman she'd been and the woman she'd become. The move Voss made was the one Olivia should have seen coming, and the fact that she hadn't told her everything about how far off center this night had knocked her. Her radio crackled, and it was his voice, but it had changed again, stripped of the warmth and the theater, and the professional calm reduced now to something raw and hoarse and pushed to its edge by pain. Sergeant Reyes, Voss said, "You shot me." "I did," Olivia said. "High shoulder, clean through. You could have put it through my heart from where you were sitting. You've done it to 11 other men tonight without a second's hesitation. But you didn't do it to me." A ragged breath. "Why?" And Olivia, sitting on the fuel shed with her hands finally starting to steady, understood that he was asking a real question and that she didn't have a comfortable answer. "Because you were the only clear shot I had, and my husband was still in the tunnel mouth," she said. "I took the target I could take. The shoulder was where the geometry gave me. Don't flatter yourself that it was mercy." But even as she said it, some part of her wondered if it was true. She had taken the shoulder, and she was very, very good, and at 900 meters with a clear line, she did not miss what she aimed at, and a small, cold voice in her head asked her what exactly she'd been aiming at in that half second, and she did not want to answer it. "I don't believe you," Voss said softly. "I think the ghost of the schoolhouse is tired of counting faces. I think you've been looking for a reason not to add mine all night, and I'm going to give you the biggest reason of all." A pause, and then his voice hardened into something that made her blood go to ice. "I still have people, Reyes, not up here, down in your base. You think I sent everyone at the walls. I'm not an amateur. I left a team inside during the confusion before your husband ever got you out of that ops room. 3 men, and right now they're standing in the one building on Black Ridge you can't see from that fuel shed, and they're standing over the people you've been hiding there." Olivia's whole body went still. The central buildings, where Fields had pulled everyone back, where the wounded were, where Nash was. "You're lying," she said, but her voice betrayed her because she wasn't sure. "Am I radio your corporal, the one you like? Fields. Go ahead. I'll wait." Voss's breathing was a wet rasp now. "Ask her if there are 3 men she doesn't recognize standing in the room with her right now, and ask her why she hasn't called it in. And the answer, Sergeant, is that they told her the second she keys that radio to warn you they start shooting. So she's been standing there this whole time frozen, saying nothing, while you sat up on your shed feeling like you'd won." Olivia's hands shook as she switched frequencies. "Fields," she said. "Amy, are you there? One word. Just tell me you're okay." Silence. "Amy, please." The radio hissed, and then so quiet Olivia almost missed it. Fields' voice, tight and small and terrified in a way Olivia had never heard from her all night, said, "I can't talk right now, ma'am." 6 words, but Olivia heard everything underneath them. She heard the gun. She heard the 3 men. She heard the young woman she'd told not to die, standing very still in a room, keeping 7 people alive with the flat calm of her own voice, exactly the way Olivia had taught her without ever teaching her. It's true, Olivia said and closed her eyes. You have people inside. Now you understand, Voss said, and the satisfaction was back floating on top of the pain. Here's the new arrangement. Forget the base, forget the colonel, you can keep him. He's an old man and he's dying anyway. Here is all I want. I want you, in person, down at the Northern Gap alone, unarmed on your knees, and when I see you there, when I have the ghost of the schoolhouse, where I can look at her, I'll call my men off your corporal, and you're wounded, and I'll take my people, and I'll leave this mountain. Your life for the 7 of them. That's the deal. That's the only deal. And you have 5 minutes to decide because my shoulder hurts and my patience is gone and I have nothing left to lose. The radio went dead. For a long moment, Olivia sat completely still on the fuel shed and the enormity of it settled over her like the cold. He wanted her to walk down and kneel in the snow and let him kill her. And the horror of it, the thing that made her chest seize, was that she was going to do it because there was no version of the math where she didn't. 7 lives against 1. Fields, Nash, 5 wounded soldiers who trusted her. Her life laid down for theirs. It was the cleanest equation she'd ever been handed, and she hated it, and she was going to solve it the only way it could be solved. The tunnel exit clanged, and Ethan came up out of the ground filthy and bleeding and alive. And Delgado behind him, and between them the colonel gray-faced but breathing. And Ethan took one look at his wife's face and knew. No, he said. No, whatever it is, no. Ethan, I know that look. That's the look you get right before you decide to sacrifice yourself. I've seen it once tonight and already on my own face, and you talk me out of it, so don't you dare. He crossed the shed and grabbed her shoulders. Tell me what he said. She told him, all of it. The 3 men inside. Fields' 6 words. The deal. Her life for 7 others on her knees at the Gap. And she watched Ethan Walker's face go through everything a man's face can go through, the disbelief and the rage and the desperate scrambling for another way, and then the terrible dawning understanding that there wasn't one, that the math was the math, and that his wife had already done it in her head and arrived where he was arriving now. There has to be another way, he said, and his voice cracked. You always find another way. The tunnel, the tower, the ghost story. You've pulled a rabbit out of a hat every hour all night, so pull one out now. Liv, please tell me you've got one more. Not this time, Olivia said, and she was calm now, the terrible calm of a decision made. This isn't a firefight, Ethan. There's no geometry to solve. He's got 3 guns on 7 people in a room I can't see, and he's dying, which means he means it. A dying man's got no reason to bluff. If I don't go, he gives the order, and Fields and Nash and 5 wounded kids die in the next 5 minutes, and then he probably does it anyway. The only move on the board that saves them is me walking down there, so I'm going to walk down there. He'll kill you. Probably, Olivia, but not definitely. She took his hands off her shoulders and held them. Listen to me. Listen. He wants me on my knees unarmed so he can look at me. He's not going to just shoot me from cover. He wants the moment. He wants to stand in front of the ghost of the schoolhouse and be the man who finally ended her. That's his whole psychology. I've watched it all night. Everything with him is personal and theatrical and about proving something. And a man who needs a moment is a man who gives you a moment. He's going to want to talk. He's going to want to be seen doing it. And in that moment, however long it is, there's a chance, not a good one, but a chance, and a chance is more than 7 wounded kids have if I stay up here. Then I go with you. You can't. He said alone, he'll be watching. If he sees 2 people come down, he calls it off and kills them anyway. She squeezed his hands. But here's what you're going to do. The second I stand up from my knees, whatever happens, however it happens, you and Delgado are going to hit those 3 men in the central building, because with Voss focused on me at the Gap, his attention is off his inside team, and Fields is not the woman she was 3 hours ago. She's been noticing things nobody notices for 14 months. And tonight she learns she can act on them. She'll feel the moment shift. She'll be ready. You hit them from outside, she moves from inside, and you take those 3 men in the space of 2 seconds. That's the plan. That's how you save the 7. I'm the distraction. You're the rescue. And you. I'm the ghost, Olivia said. Let me haunt him one last time. Ethan pulled her against him and held her so hard it hurt. and neither of them said anything for a moment. And then he said into her hair the truest thing he'd ever said to her. When you told the ops room who you were, I thought I'd married a stranger. I spent the whole night watching you do impossible things and feeling like I never knew you at all. But I was wrong, Liv. This isn't the stranger. This is you. This is the most you've ever been in front of me. You didn't hide a killer for 3 years. You hid this. A woman who does the math and comes up with her own life on the wrong side of it and walks down the mountain anyway. That's not the thing I should have been afraid of. That's the thing I should have been in love with the whole time. And I was. I just didn't know its real name until tonight. Olivia held on to that. She would need it in the next 10 minutes. She pressed it into the place where the count of faces lived and let it push back against the dark just a little. There's something you don't know, she said quietly, pulling back to look at him. About why I left. The real reason. I never told you, and I'm going to tell you now because I might not get another chance, and I don't want to die with you only knowing half of me. You're not going to die. Let me say it anyway. She took a breath. My last mission, 9 years in top of my field, the best they ever made. And they sent me to take a shot and I took it, and it was the right shot. The target was everything they said he was, and I did my job perfectly. And after they told me there'd been a child in the building. Not from my round, from what came after the thing my shot set in motion. And I hadn't known. There was no way I could have known. Everyone said it wasn't my fault, and they were right, it wasn't. But I understood something that day, Ethan. I understood that I was so good at this, so precise, so gifted, that I would spend my whole life being the first domino in things I couldn't see the end of. That my gift didn't stop at the edge of my scope. It rippled out into rooms I'd never look into. And I couldn't live with being that good and that blind at the same time. So I ran. I didn't run because I was dangerous. I ran because I could never see far enough to be sure I was doing good, and I couldn't stand the not seeing anymore. Ethan's eyes were wet. Liv. And tonight, she went on, tonight for the first time in 9 years, I can see the whole board. Every shot I've taken tonight, I've known exactly what it was for. Those men came to kill you, and I stopped them, and there's no ripple I can't see, no room I'm not looking into. For one night, my gift did nothing but good, clean, and clear, and whole, and I got to be the woman I always wanted to be behind the rifle instead of the one I was afraid I was. She smiled, and it was the saddest and most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. So if this is where it ends, I want you to know it ended right. It ended with me seeing exactly what I was doing and why. That's all I ever wanted, to see the whole thing and know it was good. You gave me that tonight just by being worth saving. Thank you. Don't you say goodbye to me, Ethan said fiercely. Don't you dare. You come back up this mountain. You promised you'd never forgive me if I died. Well, I'm turning it around. If you die down there, I will never forgive you. Those are my terms. You don't have permission. I'll do my best, Olivia said. Oh, bando. Now help me. There's one thing he doesn't know, and it's the only card I've got. What? She reached down and pulled something from the small of her back, and Ethan stared because it was a pistol, one of Voss's men, small and flat and hidden. He said, unarmed, Olivia said, and he's going to have me searched, or he'll search me himself because he's careful even when he's dying. So this is no good where it is. She looked at him. There's only one place they never search a woman they've already decided is beaten. And I'm going to need you to not watch me do this because it's undignified and I've got very little dignity left tonight. Liv, if he finds it, then I die the same as I would with empty hands, but with a chance I didn't have before. She checked the weapon with quick, sure movements, 3 rounds, that was all 3 rounds, and 1 shattered-shouldered killer, in a moment she'd have to steal. It's not much, but you taught me something tonight, Ethan, without knowing it. You went into that tunnel with a 1 in 10 chance because 7 people needed it. So I'm going to walk down to that gap with a 1 in 10 chance because 7 people need it. And if a captain who's never fired a shot in anger can do it, then the ghost of the schoolhouse sure as hell can. The radio crackled. Voss's voice weaker now, but iron underneath. 2 minutes, Sergeant. Olivia keyed it. I'm coming down, alone, unarmed. Call your men off my people the second you see me. When I see you on your knees, not before. When you see me on my knees, she agreed and clicked off. She stood up. She looked at her husband one last time. She did not say goodbye because he'd forbidden it and because saying it would make it real. Instead, she said, "The second I go down on my knees, you go. Don't wait for a signal. My knees are the signal. You count to three, and you hit them. Trust Fields. Trust the plan." And Ethan, her voice finally wavered. "If it goes wrong, if I don't come back up, you go home and you find Colonel Harmon's daughters, and you tell them who got their father off this mountain. And then you live. You hear me? You don't build a shrine to me and stop living. You live and you love someone else someday, and you let me have been a good thing that happened to you instead of the thing that ended you. That's an order from your wife. Promise me." "I can't promise that," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "I know," Olivia said softly. "That's how I know you meant every day of the last 3 years. Now let me go save them." And she turned and she climbed down off the fuel shed, and she walked out through the broken base toward the northern gap unarmed except for 3 rounds and a lifetime of skill, a woman who had come to this mountain to hold her husband's hand and was now walking down it to lay her life in the snow for 7 strangers who'd become hers in a single night. The walk to the gap was the longest of her life. She kept her hands visible. She kept her steps steady. And as she walked, she prayed not for herself, but that Fields would feel the moment coming, that Nash would keep his nerve, that Ethan would count to 3 and move, that all the pieces she'd set in motion would fall the way she'd read them. Voss was waiting at the gap. He was on his feet, which cost him. She could see it costing him his left arm, hanging useless and dark with blood, his face gray as ash. But he was standing, and he had a pistol in his good hand, and 2 of his men flanked him. And when he saw her come out of the dark, the ghost of the schoolhouse walking toward him, with her hands open, something moved across his ruined face that was almost reverence. "There she is," he breathed, "the woman who cost me a mountain." "Here I am," Olivia said. "Call off your men inside. That was the deal." "On your knees first." Olivia looked at him, and then she looked just for a fraction of a second past him up toward the central building she couldn't see, where 7 people were waiting, and she thought of Fields' 6 words, "I can't talk right now, ma'am," and she thought of Ethan counting, and she got down on her knees in the snow. "Call them off," she said. "Now you've got me. Keep your word or don't, but if you've got any honor left in you at all, you let those wounded kids live. They're nothing to you. This was never about them." Voss studied her for a long moment. Then he lifted his radio to his mouth with his good hand, the pistol still trained on her, and he said, "Inside team, stand down, leave the wounded, fall back to the gap." And she heard it go out, heard the order land, and up in the central building, 3 men who had been holding 7 lives lowered their weapons and turned to leave, which meant for one perfect, fatal instant, 3 armed men had their backs to Corporal Amy Fields. And Amy Fields, who had spent 14 months noticing what nobody noticed, and one night learning she could act on it, felt the moment shift exactly the way Olivia had promised her it would, and she moved. 200 meters away, Olivia heard it start. The sudden burst of fire from the central building, Fields and the wounded, who could still hold a weapon, taking the 3 men in the backs before they cleared the door. And at the very same instant, Ethan and Delgado hitting them from the outside. The plan folding shut like a trap, and it was over in the 2 seconds Olivia had promised it would be. Voss's head snapped toward the sound. And in that fraction of a second, that stolen moment, she'd known his need for theater would give her that one instant where the dying man's attention left her to look at the collapse of his last gambit. Olivia Walker moved. Her hand went behind her back. 3 rounds, 1 shattered-shouldered killer. 1 moment. She had told Ethan she couldn't shoot through the person she loved. She had learned that lesson in the worst way, watching him block her line while Voss rose behind him. But there was no one between her and Voss now. There was only the snow and the gap and the ghost and the man who tried to take everything from her. And for the first time all night, the geometry was clean and the line was clear, and there was nothing in the world between Olivia Reyes and the thing she had to do. Voss turned back to her a half-second too late, and his eyes found the pistol coming up in her hand, and something crossed his face, and it was not fear. It was recognition. "There she is," he said again, softly, almost tenderly, a dying master looking at the only person on earth who'd ever truly beaten him. "There's the ghost." Olivia did not miss. She never had when the line was clear. The 2 men flanking him were down before they understood what had happened. Her second and third rounds finding them in the half-beat after the first, and then it was quiet, and it was over. And Colonel Alexander Voss lay in the snow at the northern gap of Black Ridge Base with the ghost of the schoolhouse ice kneeling above him, and the mountain that had roared all night went silent at last. She knelt there for a long moment, breathing her 3 rounds, spent her hands finally still. Then Ethan was there, running out of the dark, and fields behind him, and Nash and Delgado, all of them alive, all of them whole, and Ethan pulled her up off her knees and into his arms and held her while she shook, and she let him. She finally let him. 3 years of hiding in one night of war, and 34 names, an account that would never leave her, all of it pouring out of her, at last into the arms of the man who had never once been afraid of her. "You came back," he said into her hair over and over. "You came back, you came back." "You counted to 3, she said. "I counted to 3. Fields felt it. She felt it. "She's okay. They're all okay, Liv. The 7, everyone in that building is alive because of you." He pulled back and took her face in his hands, and there were tears cutting clean lines through the grime on his cheeks. "You did the math, and you put your own life on the wrong side of it, and you walked down here anyway, and you still found a way to come back to me. You impossible woman. You beautiful, impossible woman." Olivia looked past him at the survivors gathering in the gray light that was just beginning to touch the eastern ridge at Fields, with her arm around Nash at Delgado, holding the wounded colonel upright at all of them, alive because a visitor nobody expected had counted the exits and refused to look away. And she understood, standing there in the wreckage of the longest night of her life, that Voss had been wrong about her after all. He'd said the best of them don't retire, they just wait. He'd said she'd missed it. He'd said nobody shoots the way she shot and hates it. But she'd shot the way she shot tonight. Not because she'd missed it, and not because she was still the woman she'd run from, but because 7 people needed her to be. And the difference between those 2 things was the entire difference between the ghost of the schoolhouse and Olivia Walker. Voss had lived and died believing the gift was the woman, and he'd never once understood that the gift was only ever a tool, and that the woman was the one who chose every single time what the tool was for. She'd chosen love. All night, every shot she'd chosen love. And that she finally understood was the thing she'd been running from for 3 years without ever knowing it. Not that she was dangerous, but that she was capable of laying down every piece of herself, her safety, her peace, her hard-won quiet, her actual life for other people, and that a person who could do that could never really hide, never really be nobody, never really stop being called upon when the silence before danger fell. The sun came up over Black Ridge Base, and the woman who had come only to visit her husband stood in the light with his arms around her, alive, and wept. Not for the count of faces, though she would carry those forever, but for the simple, unbearable fact that she had seen the whole board this time, seen every shot, and known its purpose, and that when it was over, the man she loved was still breathing, and there was no ripple she couldn't see, no room she hadn't looked into, nothing hidden anymore from him or from herself. For the first time in 9 years, the counting in her head was quiet. Not because there were no faces, but because for once, every choice had been clean. The helicopters came 2 hours after sunrise, and by then the mountain had already given up its dead. Olivia sat on an overturned crate near the northern gap with a blanket around her shoulders that Fields had put there, and she watched the medevac teams move across the base she'd fought all night to save, and she felt strangely hollowed out the way a bell feels after it stopped ringing. Ethan hadn't left her side once. He sat beside her with his shoulder against hers, and every few minutes his hand found hers and squeezed, as if to keep checking she was still there. "You should let them look at your arm," he said. "It's not mine," she said automatically, and then remembered that this time it was that, somewhere in the night, she'd taken a graze along her forearm she couldn't even remember getting. "Later, let them work on the ones who need it." A young medic crouched in front of her anyway, took her wrist gently, began cleaning the wound. He couldn't have been more than 22, and he kept glancing at her face, and finally he said, "Ma'am, is it true what they're saying?" "What are they saying?" "That a civilian held the ridge, that somebody's wife came up here for the weekend and took down a whole assault force with his rifle." He shook his head. "Nobody believes it. They're saying it can't be true." Olivia looked at him. This boy who would go home and tell this story his whole life and never once be believed, and she felt something turn over in her chest. "What's your name?" she asked. "Corporal Diaz, ma'am." "Corporal Diaz, do me a favor. When they ask you what happened up here, tell them the soldiers of Black Ridge held their base. Tell them they fought and they held and they saved each other. That's the true story. That's the only story that matters. She let him finish wrapping her arm. The rest of it is just details. But Diaz wasn't wrong that people didn't believe it, and over the next few hours, Olivia watched the disbelief arrive in waves in the faces of the officers who came off the helicopters, in the careful blank expressions of the men who took her aside to ask her questions. They'd found 30 enemy dead on the mountain and inside the wire. They'd found a decorated foreign colonel named Alexander Voss dead at the Northern Gap. They'd found a base that should have fallen, that by every measure of manpower and position and firepower should have been overrun. In the first hours, still standing, still held with 7 survivors and 1 civilian visitor who wouldn't quite meet anyone's eyes when they asked her how. Colonel Harmon told them they'd stabilized him and had him ready to fly out, and he was pale and weak and full of morphine. But when a full bird colonel from division leaned over his stretcher and asked him what had happened on Black Ridge, Harmon grabbed the man's sleeve with surprising strength. "You want to know what happened?" Harmon rasped. "I'll tell you what happened. I was a hostage on that ridge for 6 hours. I heard everything over their radio, every move that woman made." His eyes found Olivia across the yard. "I heard a man named Voss, who I'm told was one of the most dangerous operators in the world, spend a whole night getting outthought by somebody's wife. I heard her take his force apart one man at a time. I heard her trade her own life for 7 of my people at the end and then find a way to live anyway. And I heard my own men kids who'd never fired a shot in anger hold a line they had no business holding because she made them believe they could." He was crying now the way old soldiers cry, silent and furious. "You put whatever you want in your report, but that woman saved every soul who walked off this mountain, and I will spend whatever's left of my career making sure the right people know it, even if the public never can." And that was the thing that became clear over those first strange days. The public never could. They took Olivia to a base in Colorado Springs, and they debriefed her for 3 days, and slowly she understood that what had happened on Black Ridge was going to disappear. Not because anyone doubted it, not anymore, but because the whole thing was too complicated, too classified, too tangled up in questions about who Voss had worked for and how a foreign assault team had gotten that deep into American mountains, and why a supply base had been chosen, and what Lieutenant Mercer had been promised. There would be a quiet investigation. There would be reports that only a handful of people would ever read. And the story of the night, the real story, the one where a retired Marine sniper came to visit her husband and ended up holding a mountain, would be locked away in a vault where no one would ever find it. Olivia found she didn't mind. "You don't mind?" Ethan asked her on the 3rd night in the small guest quarters they had been given. "You did the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen a human being do, and they're going to bury it, and you don't mind." "I minded once," Olivia said. 9 years ago, I'd have minded. Back then, I wanted them to see it, all of it. I wanted the record to say I was the best, because being the best was the only thing I had that felt like mine." She sat down on the edge of the narrow bed. "But that's the thing I finally figured out on that mountain, Ethan. I spent 9 years being a legend nobody could know about, a name whispered in schoolhouses, a ghost. And it hollowed me out because a legend isn't a person. A legend can't be loved. A legend just gets used and put back in the vault." She looked up at him. "I don't want to be a legend. I've been one. It's the loneliest thing in the world. I want to be your wife. And your wife doesn't need the whole world to know what she did on a mountain. Your wife just needs you to know." "I know," Ethan said. "I'll never not know." "Then that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything." But something had shifted between them, and they both knew it, and it took another day before either of them was brave enough to name it. It came out on the drive home, the long, quiet drive down out of the mountains and across the plains, toward the small house they'd bought together, and barely lived in the house that was supposed to be the whole point of the life they were building. "You've been quiet since Colorado Springs," Ethan said, watching the road. "And it's not the tired kind of quiet. It's the other kind. The kind you used to do in our first year when you'd go somewhere in your head and I couldn't follow." He glanced at her. "Talk to me, Liv. Please. Don't close the door again. Not now, not after all of it." Olivia was quiet for a long moment, watching the mountains shrink in the mirror behind them. "I'm scared," she said finally. "Of what? Of what happens now?" She turned to look at him. "For 3 years, I told myself a story, Ethan. The story was that Olivia Reyes was dead and Olivia Walker was somebody new, somebody gentle, somebody who'd never pick up a rifle again. And I believed it. I built our whole marriage on top of it. And then one night on a mountain, I found out it wasn't true. She was never dead. She was just sleeping. And the second 7 people needed her, she woke up like she'd never been gone. Her voice caught. So now I don't know who I am. I thought I'd changed. I thought I'd become someone better. And it turns out I was always both women the whole time, and I don't know how to hold that. I don't know how to be someone who makes you coffee in the morning and also someone who can do what I did on that ridge. I don't know how those 2 people live in the same body. And I'm terrified that now that she's awake, she won't go back to sleep. And one day you'll look at me and see the ghost instead of your wife, and I couldn't survive that. I could survive the whole mountain, but I couldn't survive that. Ethan pulled the car over to the side of the road. He put it in park and he turned in his seat and he took both her hands and he looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. I need you to hear me, he said. Really hear me, because I've been trying to figure out how to say this since the sun came up on that mountain, and I finally know how. You keep talking about these 2 women like they're at war, the gentle wife and the deadly ghost. Like you have to pick one, like one of them is the real you and the other one's a mask. He shook his head slowly. But Liv, I watched you for a whole night and I never once saw 2 women. I saw one. I saw a woman who is so gentle, so full of care, that when 7 strangers needed protecting, she was willing to spend her own life to do it. The thing that made you deadly on that mountain and the thing that makes you gentle in our kitchen are not 2 different things. They're the same thing. It's the same love. It always was. Olivia stared at him. The reason you count the faces, Ethan went on, his voice thick, the reason it hollowed you out, the reason you ran, is that you were never a killer who learned to care. You were always someone who cared too much, holding a weapon that demanded she not. That's the whole tragedy of who you were before you met me. They took the most caring person I've ever known, and they made her into an instrument, and every time she used it, it cost her a piece of the thing that made her, because she was never built for it. Not because she wasn't good at it, because she was too kind for it. He wiped his eyes. So no, I'm not afraid I'll look at you and see a ghost, because there is no ghost. There's just you. There was only ever you, the most compassionate person I've ever met, who happens to also be, when the people she loves are in danger, the most dangerous. And I don't want you to kill either one of those women, Liv. I want you to finally let them be the same person. Because she's magnificent. And I've been in love with her for 3 years, and I fell more in love with her every hour of that night, and I am never ever going to be afraid of her. Olivia broke. She broke the way she hadn't let herself break on the mountain, the way she hadn't broken in 3 years of hiding, and Ethan pulled her across the seat and held her while she came apart. And she cried for the child in the building, 9 years ago, and the 34 dead of Black Ridge, and the woman she tried to bury, and the woman she tried to be, and the impossible grief of finding out they'd been the same person all along. And Ethan held her through all of it, and he didn't try to fix it, and he didn't try to stop it. And when it finally ran its course, and she sat spent against his chest, he just kept holding her out there on the side of an empty road in the middle of the country. 2 people who had walked through fire and come out the other side still holding hands. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. You don't have to know how, Ethan said. You just have to stop running. That's all. You've been running from her for 3 years, and she caught you on that mountain, and now you get to stop, because it turns out she was never the thing chasing you. She was just you trying to catch up to yourself. They drove the rest of the way home in a silence that was, for the first time, not the closed door kind, but the other kind, the warm kind, the kind that lives between 2 people who have finally stopped hiding from each other. The weeks that followed were harder than Olivia expected and easier than she feared. There were nights she woke up counting her hands moving on the blanket as if working a bolt, and Ethan would wake with her and hold her hand still and say her name until the mountain let her go. There were mornings she couldn't get out of bed, when the weight of 34 faces pressed her flat, and Ethan learned not to try to lift the weight, but just to lie beside her under it. There was a day she drove past a hunting store and had to pull over because her heart was pounding, and a day a car backfired, and she was on the ground behind a mailbox before she knew she'd moved, and Ethan, who'd been walking beside her, simply got down on the ground beside her and waited, and never once made her feel ashamed. But there were other things too. There was the day the letter came hand-delivered, no return address, and inside it were photographs of 2 young women and an old man, and a note in a shaking hand that said, Only you gave us back our father. We don't know your name, and we're told we never will. But every year on this day for the rest of our lives, our family is going to set a place at the table for a woman we'll never meet. Thank you for our whole world." And Olivia had held that letter and understood finally that the seven she'd saved and the families behind them were the ripple this time. The ripple she could see the good she'd set in motion spreading out into rooms she'd never enter. And for the first time, the ripple didn't terrify her. It healed something. There was the day Fields called because somehow Fields had gotten her number, and the young corporal who was being quietly moved into a program that would make use of the thing Olivia had seen in her said, "I keep thinking about what you told me, that I was built for this even if nobody ever told me." Nobody ever had told me, ma'am. My whole life people looked past me, and you looked at me for about 5 minutes and saw the thing I couldn't see in myself. A pause. "I just wanted to say thank you for seeing me and for not dying because I decided I liked you too." There was the day Nash sent a photograph of himself standing next to a small, gray-haired woman outside a house in Ohio, and on the back he'd written, "Called my mom when the sun came up." Just like you said, here she is. Thank you for the 3 steps and cut. And Olivia had put that photograph on the refrigerator, and every time she saw it, she thought about how close she'd come to losing that boy, and how the thing that saved him wasn't her rifle at all, but the simple act of telling a scared kid to run for his mother instead of for the mission. And slowly, without her quite noticing the moment it happened, Olivia Walker stopped being 2 women trying to kill each other and started being 1 woman learning to live. She never went back to the work. She was never tempted. Ethan asked her once carefully whether some part of her missed it the way Voss had insisted she must, and she thought about it honestly and told him the truth. "No," she said, "that's the thing Voss never understood. He thought the gift was the woman. He thought if you were good at it, you must love it, and if you loved it, you could never stop. But the gift was never the woman. The gift was just something my hands could do. The woman was always the one deciding what it was for. And I've decided." She took his hand and put it flat against her chest over her heart. "It's for this. It was always for this. Every shot I ever took that meant anything I took because I couldn't stand to watch someone I could protect get hurt. 9 years they pointed that at strangers and told me it was duty. One night I got to point it at the man I love, and I finally understood what it was actually for. And now that I know, I don't need to do it anymore, because knowing was the whole thing I was missing. I don't have to be the ghost to know I could be, and that's enough. That's finally enough." Ethan stayed in the service another year, and then he came home for good because he found, after Black Ridge, that he'd lost his taste for being anywhere his wife wasn't. They didn't talk much about the mountain to other people because there was no one who'd believe them and no one who was allowed to know, but they talked about it to each other on the hard nights and the soft ones, and over time it stopped being a wound and became a thing that had happened to them. A thing they'd survived together the night they'd finally met each other, all the way down to the bottom. Years later, on an ordinary evening in the small house, they'd finally learned to live, and a young woman came to their door. It was Fields older now, with the quiet, steady bearing of someone who'd grown into exactly what Olivia had seen in her that night. She sat at their kitchen table and drank their coffee and told them she'd spent the years since Black Ridge doing the thing Olivia had woken up in her, and doing it well and saving people because a stranger on a mountain had once looked at her for 5 minutes and told her she was built for it. "I came to ask you something," Fields said. "I've been asked to teach, to train the next ones. And I keep thinking, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to make someone into what I became. And then I remembered you did it. You did it to me in one night without even trying." She looked at Olivia. "How do you do it? How do you teach someone to be what you were?" And Olivia Walker, who had once been the most feared instructor in the Corps, who had trained the men who trained the men who'd come to kill her husband, who had spent 9 years teaching people how to end lives and 3 years learning how to build one, looked at this young woman she'd saved and thought about the whole long road that had brought her to this kitchen table. "You don't teach them to be what I was," she said finally. "That's the mistake they made with me. They taught me the hands and forgot the heart, and it nearly destroyed me. Because a person who can do what we can do without knowing exactly what it's for becomes a ghost, a weapon that walks. Don't make more of those. The world has enough." She reached across the table and took the young woman's hand. "Teach them the hands, yes, But teach them the heart first and last and always. Teach them to count the faces. Teach them that the counting is not a weakness. It's the whole point. It's the thing that keeps them human. Teach them that the gift is nothing and the choice is everything, and that every single time they pick up the weapon, they are choosing what it's for, and that choice is the only thing that will ever matter. Teach them to be so full of care that they'd lay their own lives down before they'd fail the people who need them. And then, and only then, teach them to never miss. Fields was quiet for a long time. That's not what they teach, she said finally. I know, Olivia said. That's why I'm telling you. Because I was the best they ever made. And I've spent my whole life learning that being the best at the hands means nothing if you were never taught the heart. You've got the heart, Amy. You always did. It's the thing I saw in you in 5 minutes on the worst night of both our lives. So go teach it. Build a generation that knows what the weapon is for. That's how you honor the ones we lost on that mountain. Not by making more ghosts, by making people who could be ghosts and choose every single day to be human instead. Fields left that night with something she hadn't come with, and Olivia stood in the doorway with Ethan's arm around her and watched the young woman's taillights disappear down the road, carrying the real lesson of Black Ridge out into a world that would never know where it came from. You gave her the thing nobody gave you, Ethan said quietly. I gave her the thing you gave me, Olivia said. You're the one who taught me the two women were the same person. I just passed it on. They stood in the doorway a while longer, and then they went back inside to the ordinary life they'd fought so hard to have, the life of coffee in the mornings and quiet in the evenings, in a marriage that had been tested by fire and come out unbreakable. The world would never know her name. There would be no medals, no parades, no history books. The men who came off Black Ridge alive would tell a story nobody believed, and eventually they would stop telling it, and the ghost of the schoolhouse would fade back into the vault where legends are kept. The public would never understand that a woman came to a mountain to visit her husband and stayed to hold it against 40 killers. They would never know about the 4 shots in 4 seconds, or the tunnel in the dark, or the moment she knelt in the snow and traded her life for 7 strangers and found a way to live anyway. But Olivia Walker had stopped needing the world to know a long time ago, because she finally understood the things she'd spent her whole life running from and toward. A warrior was never made by the taking of life. A warrior was made by what she was willing to lay down her own life to protect. The strongest people in the world were not the ones who never broke. They were the ones who carried every crack, every scar, every face in the long count, and still, when the silence before danger fell and other people needed them, chose to stand. She had come to that mountain as a woman trying to be nobody. She had left it as a woman who finally knew exactly who she was. And on an ordinary evening in an ordinary house with the man she loved beside her and the count of faces gone quiet. At last, Olivia Walker was neither the gentle wife nor the deadly ghost, but both at once and whole for the first time in her life, and that wholeness was the truest victory she had ever won. She was afraid and wounded and carrying her own battles. And she had stood anyway when others needed her to. That is what a hero is. That is what she was.